Welcome everyone. It's so wonderful to see a room full of people here at another in a series of our Waterways Speaker Series presentations. My name is Lori Heber, and I am the director of the White Violet Center for Eco-Justice at the Sisters of Providence at St. Mary of the Woods. There are a number of sisters here today. As a matter of fact, there aren't any strangers in the room here. It's nice to see everybody. And I also have the honor of serving on the Riverscape board, and Riverscape was a part of the group of people who brought the Waterways Smithsonian exhibit to the town of West Terre Haute and then helped to organize this speaker series. And we're delighted that you could be a part of it as we learn just one more way in which the river, the waters around us impact our environment in so many ways, be it the physical environment, the spiritual environment, and so forth. So thank you for coming. It's also my honor, please come in and have a seat. It's also my honor to introduce today Sister Janet Gilligan. She's our presenter. She's been a Sister of Providence since 1957. By my calculations, that's 64 years?
I couldn't count it, so that's why I put it.
64. Had to do the math on my own age in order to figure that out. She has a BS in Education from St. Mary of the Woods College, an MA and a PhD in English from Northern Illinois University, so I hope she isn't critiquing what my speech here today. She has taught in Joliet, Chicago, and Oklahoma City. She was a consultant and editor in educational publishing and taught at Wayne State College in Nebraska for 22 years. And she now works organizing and advancing the archives of the Sisters of Providence. And as you might imagine, the archives of the Sisters of Providence are quite a treasure trove of history, not only for the congregation, but for this part of the world and Indiana for sure. So please join me in welcoming Sister Janet Gilligan.
Let's hope I can get this to work. Okay. What is the Shell Chapel? This is about St. Anne's Shell Chapel. It's also about remembering and telling stories. So the Shell Chapel is a shrine to St. Anne, who's the patroness of Brittany, France, and of mariners. Here's a picture of Brittany. And it's a historic building. Is this on?
No. It doesn't sound like it.
How do I turn? Do I turn it?
It's not meant for projecting your voice. It's just to get a clearer recording for our records.
Affecting my voice, did you say?
The microphone is not meant to help you project. It's just meant to voice for our records.
Oh, okay.
So speak up, Sister Janet.
Can you hear me? I'm talking loud enough. Okay. It's also a historic building on the campus of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods. It was constructed in 1876. Okay, frequently asked questions about this. Some of them asked by me, some of them asked by other people. How did the French Sisters of Providence end up in the forests of Indiana? I assume that the Sisters of Providence know, but I'm sure there are other people who don't know that. Why did Mother Theodore vow to construct a shrine to St. Anne at St. Mary of the Woods? How did St. Anne become the patroness of Brittany and the mariners? And that's the one a lot of people ask. What is the history of the shrine at the Woods? And what is notable about the construction of the Shell Chapel? I didn't know there was anything notable till I started this presentation, and it's really interesting. Why did the sister decide to decorate the shrine with shells? That's what a lot of people say. What does it look like inside? What is the origin of the statue of St. Anne? This is my favorite question. I've been dying to find out how that statue came to be there. And then, what is the history of the St. Anne procession? Okay, how did the French Sisters of Providence end up in the forest of Indiana? Most of the clergy in 1840 were from France. They couldn't find American sisters to staff their schools, so they turned to France. And by that time, the Sisters of Providence were flourishing in France. So in 1839, Bishop de Hollandière of Vincennes, Indiana, came to Rouillé, France, seeking sisters to teach and care for the sick and orphans. There he is. And this is Rouillé-sur-Loire in France, where the Sisters of Providence were pretty well established. So in 1840, Sister St. Theodore Guerin and 5 companions set out for America. I'm just doing this quick survey because I assume not all of you know all the stuff that we Sisters of Providence and She was chosen to lead 6 sisters, told to keep detailed records. After a 40-day voyage across the ocean, they arrived at New York. 40 days is a long time. At the request of the superior of the French community, Mother Theodore kept a detailed journey and wrote lengthy letters, which is why we know so much about her. And she was such a good writer. So, okay, this is their first convent. Then they improved it. Mother Theodore wrote, "For garden and yards we have all the woods, and the wilderness is our only cloister, for our home is planted therein as though it were an oak tree." You can tell how she said, has a lovely way of saying things. The sisters also, from the beginning, did a lot of sketches of their buildings, which is why we have a pretty good sense of what things look like. The one in the left-hand corner is a sketch. She decided to open the academy in 1841. In less than 3 years it was established. The bishop had wanted it to be the sisters' home, and they decided to make it the school because education was always their priority. Then it became Foley Hall, the academy. This is Foley Hall in 1920. Then eventually Le Fair Hall housed the students, the college students. As you know, now we have a new dormitory, Les Bois. So it's still there. When Mother Theodore died, there were at least 67 Sisters of Providence serving in institutions, 67 institutions. And these are some of the pictures from archives we have of those very early institutions, St. Anne's Orphanage and the school in Jasper. And these are the missions she established by the time she died. And as you can see, the one at the top, St. Mary the Woods College, is still in existence, still flourishing. Many of the others, most of the others are closed eventually, but some as late as like in the 1990s. Okay, why did she vow to construct a statue to St. Anne at St. Mary of the Woods? Now, the Sisters of Providence all know this story, but be patient. Okay, in 1943, there was a terrible fire, probably from arson, destroyed their barn and all their provisions. So Mother Theodore had to go to France to try to raise funds to support the community because they were in really difficult straits. It's only like 2 years after they arrived. The barn was destroyed. So in November of 43, she went to France in 1843 in April. In November, she had to return because the bishop was causing some problems back at St. Mary of the Woods. So she and an American sister with some French postulants set out to return to America on a ship called the Nashville. This was not a good time of year to travel. It was very dangerous. And there also were steamships at this time, but they were expensive. So like a true Sister of Providence, she chose the economical route. Okay, the ship ran into some terrible storms, and she gives us vivid descriptions of these. So violent was the storm that it took the sailors more than 2 hours to reef the mainsail alone. The waves broke over our heads with a frightful roar. We thought each moment would be our last. And this is like one of the first storms. There were like 3 or 4 of them. And we sort of, take it for granted now, but it was really horrible. So she recorded what happened in her journal. And we have the rough draft of her journal in the archives. This is scanned into Indiana memory, but there's no translation of the rough draft. It was revised later. But I think it's valuable to have the original notes of someone. You can see what she crossed out and what she said. And she refers in this to St. Anne of Doré. She was going to erect a chapel, but she doesn't say I was going to erect a chapel, but we vowed a Mass in honor of St. Anne Doré. And then this is the final version, was revised and published in a French journal. And that's the one that's translated in Mother Theodore's journals and letters. And this is the translation. We had just vowed a Mass in honor of St. Anne Doré and an inscription on the walls of that chapel testifying that the Nashville had been saved by St. Anne. Now, she doesn't ever say we vowed to build a chapel, but it's assumed, she says, apparently she thought she'd already said it or something, or maybe she wrote it in a letter. But she says we're going to write the story on the walls of the chapel to say what happened. So she's always writing things. As the storm, this is her description, as the storm grew in violence, the sisters wanted to make other vows other than to St. Anne. I would not permit it. So I love that. St. Anne, we're sticking by St. Anne. We said we'd do it to St. Anne and we're going to keep with her. For some minutes there was absolute silence, and suddenly it was broken by an extraordinary crash, as if the vessel had completely broken asunder. The ship had in fact been thrown upon the beam end and was now underwater. The keel was above the surface and the top of the mast below. It's hard to imagine. It was apparently turned over. I couldn't find any illustration of that because this is as close as I could come. The water was rushing in through every opening. It found its way into the hold, the cabin, and indeed everywhere. She always writes things so vividly you can picture them happening. Imagine, if you can, the fright, the terror of women and children who in the middle of the night felt themselves sinking in an icy sea that pressed about them on all sides. So there were lots of other travelers, other immigrants in the ship, and many of them were poor, and there were lots of children. So everyone was really terrified. The wind, which blew furiously from the southwest, veered around with the quickness of lightning, and blowing with the same violence from the northwest, reversed the wave which was engulfing us and saved the ship. So they were blown almost over, and then a contrary wind blew them up, so they felt it, straightened up the ship. And this seemed miraculous to them, which it was really. A few minutes more and it would have been too late. So it really was a very close call. Now we sort of take it for granted they were saved, but they could easily all have been, killed in sea. Okay, now I'm going to skip to another topic because everyone keeps saying, how did St. Anne become the patroness of sailors and of Brittany? Because it seems like the mother of Mary has nothing to do with Brittany or sailors. Okay, Brittany was settled by Celts fleeing from the Viking invasions in the British Isles, and they brought their language and religion with them. They were Christians who incorporated Christian beliefs into their ancient primitive doctrines, and one of their goddesses, their chief goddess, was Anna, or Anu. So we think perhaps St. Anne became identified with that goddess. Okay, the name of the Mother of Mary does not appear in Scripture. She was introduced in an apocalyptic gospel in 170, a nice little story somebody made up. But she became very popular. Devotion to her spread through the church. Here's my little picture. And in the 7th century, there was a church dedicated to her in a small village 3 miles from Auray, a town in Brittany. So this is how, and we assume that came because the Britons had fled Great Britain, had fled the Vikings and come to Brittany and settled in Brittany, and they had their own language, Breton, which is still, I guess, a matter of controversy. They still want to speak that language. For a long time they spoke French. So in the 7th century, there was a church dedicated to her. Looks something like that. Of course, I don't have a picture of it. There was a statue of St. Anne, and the chapel, both of them were destroyed by the Vikings then at the end of the 7th century. But the memory of it was kept alive, and so the village was called Kirana, the village of Anna, for a long time. Okay, in 1624, Anna, the grandmother of Jesus, appeared in Kirana to a plowman, Ivan Nikolazic. And she said to him in Breton, which proves that she was from Great Britain. She was a Celt. I am Anne, the mother of Mary. And she appeared to him several times, one time with carrying a lantern in a field of his. She asked him to have a chapel built in his field. So finally, he and his friends dug up the field, and they discovered the remains of a statue of St. Anne and stones from the ancient chapel. And these pictures are from stained glass windows in the present shrine of St. Anne d'Auray. They're very lovely, really. You can see they've discovered the little statue of St. Anne. So statues are important in the story. This was considered a sign that the apparitions were genuine. From that day forward, pilgrims came in droves to Kirana, the village of Anne, even though there was no shrine or chapel there. There were still many pilgrims who came. Okay, that chapel was also in 1864, they finally built a chapel after all these pilgrims were coming. Lots of pilgrimages would come. It was plundered in 1793 by the French revolutionaries, and the statue was burned. So statues are important in the story. But the pilgrimages continued, even though there was no shrine or statue. And we even have evidence of that because Mother Theodore writes about it, that she, her sister had made a shrine to the pilgrimage of St. Anne of Auray and her health for her, and her health was much improved. And she says that they should, she's writing to France, and she says you should make a shrine there for Mother St. Charles, so thank you. Because I'm sure that will help her a lot. It will be nothing for the sisters when they visit the houses in Brittany to stop at the shrine of St. Anne of Auray and pray for Mother Charles. Okay, in 1866, a new church was built and a new statue created. And this is a lovely little painting of girls praying in that shrine in 1868, I believe it is. Little Breton girls praying in the shrine. And this is what it looks like today. So this is kind of a sister shrine of the our St. Anne's Chapel, and this is what Mother Theodore kept referring to. St. Anne d'Auray was her, was the place that she really loved. And of course her name was Anne Therese, so she had great devotion to St. Anne. They're still making pilgrimages. Okay, I did a little timeline because I think it's interesting to see how it all worked. It started in the 7th century, quite some time ago, and then that chapel was destroyed. And then it wasn't until much later, in 1763, that, I don't know how much you can see of this, that Nikolasic had the apparition, dug up the statue and the stones of the chapel, and built a second chapel to St. Anne, which then was destroyed again in the French Revolution. But in the meantime, in 1844, the chapel at St. Mary of the Woods was built. So we got ours before they got their replacement for their chapel. So here's our little chapel. I'm jumping ahead here just to show you how we're related. And then they restored, in 1868, restored the chapel of St. Anne d'Auray. And then in 1876, we built a replacement for our little chapel. But we're kind of related to that chapel in many ways. Mother Theodore was thinking of the shrine of St. Anne d'Auray when she built this chapel. Okay, what is the history of the shrine? I kind of skipped ahead to tell you that. Okay, here's some of the pictures we have of the little log cabin built in 1844 by Mother Theodore. And they planted this vine over it, this wisteria vine, so you always see pictures of it with this beautiful vine growing over it, which maybe didn't look good to the logs, but okay, so that's the first chapel. And as I said, they made sketches of everything, so that's how we know what things look like. This is a sketch by Sister Mary Cecilia, the colored one. This is a little sketch of some girls walking by. There was a lake in front of the shrine. So these are some girls walking by the shrine. And next to the first chapel was the cemetery where Mother Theodore was buried in 1856. So it was the first cemetery, really. Actually, it was the second because they buried some people by the village church, but then they moved them to this place, which is not too far from our present cemetery. On the wooden cross that marked her grave was a Latin inscription, "I sleep, but my heart watches over this house that I have built." Now, one of the sisters must have created that phrase because it's not scriptural, but it's a really beautiful expression. Some sources say the interior was decorated with shells Mother Theodore brought from France. Now, she didn't put them on the walls the way they are now, but she did apparently put shells around the chapel. At least that's what some people say, some sources say. Oh, it was replaced by a stone chapel in 1876. Here's another sketch of the stone chapel. And I just wanted to show the comparison of us with St. Anne d'Auray. We're a little tiny shrine, but we're still here, and we were there first, so. Okay, the chapel in 1910 looked like this. We have some pictures of that. Pretty much the same, but kind of bare. This is a little later. It says St. Anne de Bois. These are postcards. And this is a little bit later, you can tell because there's foliage planted around it. This is another old picture of it with the lake. There is a set that we have a plate. Someone put pictures of the various buildings on plates. We just have this one of St. Anne's Chapel, a china plate. And there was a lake in front of the chapel, which I wish we still did, but I guess there were mosquitoes. But there's this interesting picture. I don't know what that little structure is in front of it, but it's like a little pier. I don't know if the girls canoed in the lake or what happened, but okay, and here's the shrine today. All right, what is notable about the construction of the shrine? This is something I did not know or never noticed. When we came listed in the National Register of Historic Places, the chapel was described this way. The chapel is 145 years old, the oldest building on the campus, and it's described. The shell chapel is a small square building with walls composed of brownstone rough coursed rubble and a hip roof covered with slate. Dressed and coursed cornerstones are true masonry coins. Well, I said, that's interesting. I don't know what it means, but it sounds, I didn't know that. I mean, I never really looked at the outside structure of the chapel. Okay, I looked all these things up. A hip roof is a roof with slopes on all four sides, equal, come together at the top to form a ridge. So that's a hip roof. Some of you are nodding your heads because you knew this. Brownstone is a sandstone of characteristic brown or reddish brown color, and I guess it's something common in Indiana or native to Indiana. You can buy it today, I think. Rubble is stones consisting of irregularly shaped pieces, partially trimmed or square, generally with one split or finished face, which I presume is the one on the inside. You know, they had to finish it so they could put the wall against it. If there's anybody in construction here, they probably know more than I do about this, but I'm guessing. Generally with one split or finished face, selected and specified with the size range. So they arrange all these stones, make them fit somehow. So it's really interesting. I go back now and look at that and think, this is amazing. And we've been looking at it for years, not thinking about this. And then a coin are the blocks at the corner that have to be finished so that they can support everything. The stones at the corner. Okay, and then they go on. So the entry's trimmed in brick with a full round. They loved our buildings. We learned so much about our buildings when they started describing them for us. Has a 4-panel door with decorative metal gate in front of it. The metal gate is later. But so it's a lovely shrine in all seasons. We have pictures of it in the winter and in the fall. So even from the outside, without the shells, it's really a beautiful place. Okay, why did they decide, this is the question everybody wants to know, why decorate it with shells from the Wabash River? Okay, I'm thinking maybe they were homesick for their Breton shores because they were all from the ocean, not all, but many of the sisters, Mother Theodore. In 1876, when the Somme Shrine was built, Sister Mary Joseph Lafaire decided to decorate it with shells, so she's the one responsible. Now, she was from Brittany. She was from St. Malo in Brittany. Many of the Sisters of Providence had their roots in Brittany, including Mother Theodore, although she never talks about the language, so I guess they were speaking in French then, but she doesn't seem to be, talk a lot about her roots in Brittany, but definitely she lived on the shore of the ocean in Brittany. Seashores with hundreds of scattered shells were familiar to the Breton sailors. So I'm thinking they were thinking, we'll remember our home by putting these shells in the chapel. Perhaps since the chapel was dedicated to St. Anne, patroness of mariners, seam shells seemed an appropriate decoration. So maybe that's why, maybe both reasons. Mother Theodore was born in Étables-sur-Mer, Étables on the sea. Her father was a French naval officer. One sources say her nephew was a sailor who was lost at sea. So she had a lot of connection to the ocean. She often said she learned to pray among the rocks, looking out at the sea. And this is a contemporary picture of Étables. And here's 2 pictures that Carl Bender sent to me of Étables some years ago, but recently. You can see how beautiful the ocean was. So Mary Joseph Lafaire and her sister Frances Xavier, who is dead by then, but Lafaire, were both from Saint Malo which is another coastal town. And there's some women gathering mussels in the corner there. I forgot to say at the beginning, I know hardly anything about mussels. All the other talks have been, very beautiful scientific descriptions of mussels. So this is St. Joseph, Mary Joseph LaFair. She had a brother who was a merchant marine and a ship's captain, wrote lots of letters to her, and we have those in her biography. Her brother Charles, we're told by one of our historians, was a connoisseur of shells, and he admired the beautiful ones from the shores of the Wabash. So I'm assuming she sent some of them home to them, and they got to look at them. So apparently, you could walk to the Wabash in those days, and it took 4 miles. I don't know how I've been trying to figure out the route, and I cannot figure out how you can walk 4 miles to the Wabash. But so the novices made the 4-mile walk to the sandbar at Durkee's Ferry to gather shells from the banks. Now there's a picture of a baptism and a picture of the ferry itself up in the right-hand corner there, and then there's a contemporary picture over there. But the 2 photographs are from the time that this would have happened, what it looked like. Okay, the sketches of the Wabash made by the early sisters suggest that they often went to the Wabash. This is 1874, I believe, and it's a picnic at the Wabash. Except it says near Pottsville, and I don't know where there's a Pottsville on the Wabash, but maybe there was once. Some of you are nodding your head, so you would know. Here's another one, geology class in 1878. So the students must have walked down to the Wabash and had classes there. The shells they brought home were then pasted with cement to the walls of the chapel. So I've got some pictures of how they were pasted. I was going to try to identify them, and then I discovered there are hundreds of different kinds of mussel shells, so I came up on that. This is one that looks familiar, that looks a little bit like what we've got. The freshwater pearl looks like some of those on our. So I have some close-up pictures, and some of these are old, and the shells have fallen off, so they're not all, or the shells are broken. But it gives you some sense of how they glued they cemented, I believe, and we're told, all these shells to the walls. And this is to the right is a beautiful, they did some floral decorations, like they showed flowers and stems and things like that with the shells. Okay, what does it look like inside? Tradition is that Mother Theodore created the designs they've used in the shells. We have the date in which it was built, 1876. And I presume these are painted. I've looked at these, and I think the dark ones have been painted. They turned the shells around and painted them. There's a map of Indiana with the places where the Sisters of Providence had missions. And if you look real closely, you can see SM for St. Mary of the Woods, TH for Terre Haute, you see those? M for Madison, MA at the bottom. Fort Wayne is up there, FW. Indianapolis in the middle, I think that's Richmond over there, and I think that's Valparaiso, I don't know, up in the north there. But those are the places they had missions when it was built, I presume. And this is a distant picture from that. Some of this you can still see quite clearly. Some of it the shells are gone, or it's just not clear anymore. There's also this lovely picture of the Nashville, the ship that was lost at sea. And this is pretty clear. Here's a better picture of it. You can see the little ship. And then the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which is quite interesting and pretty good represent. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Can I go back? Okay. You can see the flames at the top and the cross. And then I thought, well, there aren't any thorns, but then the librarian here said those little brown things might represent the thorns throughout it. But it's not a bad little piece of art, folk art. Now this is the Eye of God is at the top, and I don't remember what this is. I knew it one time, maybe one of the sisters do, but the branch thing and the thing at the bottom, I don't know what this represents. Maybe somebody can tell me later, but it's still there. So. Okay. Remember Mother Theodore, the real promise was she's going to tell the story and she's going to put it on the walls of the chapel. Well, it's there. And it says ex voto, which means an object left as an offering in fulfillment of a vow or in gratitude. So on each of these shells now the shells are, some of them the writing is gone, the writing is not clear anymore. But this is what they shall say. And this is on the top left. In the year 1843, the affairs of this community obliged Mother Theodore, our founders, to visit France. On her return, she embarked on the Nashville. While at sea, a terrible storm endangered the vessel. When the captain had declared he could do no more, I'm doing it shell by shell, and that the vessel was at the mercy of the wind and waves, Mother Theodore made a promise to build a chapel. Now, I presume this was 1876 that they wrote this, so they're writing from what's probably their authentic memory of what happened. In honor of St. Anne, they would arrive, if they would arrive, she would build a chapel in honor of St. Anne if they would arrive safely. And though the storm continued, yet the ship was borne on the raging sea. This is on the right side now, and safely reached the American shore. Soon after arrival at St. Mary's, Mother took measures for the accomplishment of her vow. And in 1844, a small chapel was constructed, built of logs, lined with shells from the Wabash. So again, there's that reference that Mother Theodore also decorated it with shells. It was necessary to build a new chapel in 1875. The present one is built on the site. And it says, the statue of St. Anne is the one Mother Theodore brought with her from France. Now that's the only reference I've found to that. It's in the history, it says that, but it doesn't say where they got that information from. So I've been very interested in where that statue came from. I'll talk about that in a minute. And which was protectress of the ship. So it implies that she had the statue with her in the ship when they came over, and that she put it in the shrine. So I've always been fascinated with the statue. Okay, also the windows apparently are art glass windows. This is from our National Register. And I always thought, why do they have such plain windows in this chapel? Well, apparently they're not. Apparently they're really very exquisite kind of glass. Art glass is produced by rolling translucent layers of molten colored glass together into sheets. So I went back and took a picture trying to, when you're there you can see how lovely it is. The photographs don't do justice to it. But it's radiant and atmospheric when the light shines through it. So I haven't been doing justice to the windows. Apparently they're really quite remarkable. And I don't know why, okay, there's shells and coral motifs through the windows. And on one side there's a book with a stylus in it. On the other side there's scrolls, and I don't know, maybe one of the sisters can tell me later, but I don't know why there's one of each on each side. And the floor has concentric, like shell-like circles on the tile floor, shell shapes. And the ceiling has shells painted along the edge. And the floor seems to be the same tile as in the church, the Immaculate Conception Church, the vestibule, which makes me think it was put in when the church was, later on, the floor was paved with tile. There are metal scrolls on the doors, which look a little like shells. There's a lovely light, casts a really nice kind of shape on the floor when you light it. Swirling shells. Okay, then this is the altar in 1888, and you can see the floor looks like it's plain cement. So these are older pictures of the lovely altar, and there's the statue that I'm concerned about. So you notice the railings and the waves along so I guess that's the railings of the ship and the waves. On the others from another view. Okay, Jan Craven has applied for a grant from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources to renovate the chapel. And in the meantime, we can't replace anything. We have to adhere to the structure, to the integrity of the authentic structure. So we're not doing anything to it right now to fix it up, but it does need some fixing up. It's old, 145 years old, it's pretty old. Oops, I skipped just some more pictures. Okay, this is the thing that I was really interested in finding out, the origin of the statue. Tradition has always been that Mother Theodore brought it, and they thought maybe she got it from the shrine in Auray, which wasn't there yet, but maybe they were selling statues there. Our statue looks nothing like the statue they have at the shrine now. This is the statue at the shrine now. And you can see it's actually quite small, and it's carried in procession all the time. The gold statue is the actual statue. But there's no resemblance to the statue that we have. Ours looks like this. It depicts as a very common motif of St. Anne teaching Mary to read. So I don't know if you notice, she has a little book, and here's another one of St. Anne teaching Mary. And these are all from 19th century, some earlier. It's a very common motif, very appropriate for an institution, a community that teaches women. Representations of Anne teaching Mary to read were common from the earliest years of devotion to Anne. And one scholar has said, "We can agree that literacy is power. Through the pictorial arts, Anne empowers her daughter and encourages other mothers to follow her example." So this was a highly appropriate statue for us to choose, for the chapel of a community that teaches women. And here are some other representations of Anne teaching Mary to read, and they're quite similar to ours. But here's another nice one. In our statue, Mary is standing on a globe, either the earth or the moon. And she resembles Mary in much earlier representation I found, standing on a globe. But you don't find that with the St. Anne statues. We have a statue of Mary actually standing on a globe, which has a history of its own too. It was sent to Mother Theodore for their chapel, and the bishop stole it for the St. Mary of the Woods Village Chapel, and the sisters got it back eventually. And now it's in the phone room or the reception room in Providence. They were really mad at him. I can't find any statues that show Mary standing on a globe being taught by St. Anne. So my theory is that these are two separate statues. If you look, you can see the space between the two of them. I think some folk artist or somebody took two statues and put them together and said to Mother Theodore, I'll sell you this for 2 francs or something. Or maybe one of the sisters did it. So it's somebody is recreating the motif, but they're having to use 2 different statues, I think. I don't know. That's as far as I could get with it. But I was really interested in the fact that she's teaching her to read and how appropriate that was. There used to be a lake near the shrine. We were talking about that, and I wish we still had it. There's a traditional stone statue of St. Anne there that's very similar to others. And that it was 1928, it was there. I can't find in archives any history of that statue. We do have some other statues we have when they were put up, but I couldn't find anything about this particular one. And that's the statue today. The water's gone, the lake is gone, the stream is gone, but the statue is still there. And it's very similar to the traditional statues. Okay, and then there's the procession. Since 1876, when the stone chapel was built, the Sisters of Providence have had an annual procession on July 25th, the eve of the Feast of St. Anne. Some say 1844. This is one of the contentions. Well, for sure it was 1876, but did they start when they built the old chapel? We don't know. Some sources say they did, some say it was later. In the community diary of 1920, the community diary records that 900 sisters, 100 novices processed to our dear little St. Anne's Chapel, observed by 300 guests. They sang the Litany of the Blessed Mother on the way, and some of the sisters here remember this. It was hard to sing when you're walking along and trying to stay with the people behind you. And then they recited the Rosary back, and we said a particular hymn, a lovely hymn, at the shrine, which was very hard to sing without an organ, without accompaniment, but we meant 3 parts. And this is, the shrine of St. Anne del Rey has like hundreds of pilgrims. They said as many as 800, and I thought, that's too many, I wouldn't want to go. Then I looked, and this is 900 plus 100, so we had more than they do. So the media love this. They would be out here every year taking pictures of the procession. So these are some old pictures, more recent ones. And then this is some children. One of the sister artists had some children come and draw pictures of the various things. So you can see the Anne and Mary there and the ship, and then there's the procession. There's the shrine itself. The St. Anne procession is still held every year on July 25th, more or less. I think they say a few times rains prevented it from being observed, but we hold it, even if it's raining, we hold it inside now. So those who are able process to the shrine. Others process to the shrine of St. Anne in the Church of the Immaculate Conception. We have a shrine to her there, which I guess is kind of unusual for a church to have a shrine to St. Anne. So this is the procession. The shrine of St. Anne in the church, it's over on the right side. This is what it looks like. Quite lovely. And I just noticed St. Anne is teaching Mary Roman numerals. So some mathematician sister must have, when they put this up, said, let's include the numbers too. Okay. In 1940s, when Sister Mary Roger Madden was a novice, she wrote a poem about the St. Anne's procession. And in 2020, she celebrated her 80th year as a Sister of Providence and her 100th birthday. And I thought her poem was a good way to end this. I called her to ask her if I could use it. And she said, oh, of course, dear, that would be fine. She's just as alert as she ever was. The spool of time unwinds. Let us come here out of a world of shifting sands and mist, to walk a path of pattern, shade, and light, to keep once more a sacred tryst. This is memorial of an answered prayer. What happened to my thing? This is our tribute to the dead. That we have kept their promises and followed where they led. And that's the end. Now, if the sisters would like to correct some of my observations, feel free.
Any questions?
Yes, Carl?
I'll correct one thing.
What?
All the artwork are reverse shells. What you see is the outer side of the shell. The only painted thing in there besides the history is "Pray for Us."
Yes.
That has been painted.
Yes, right, that's in shells too. St. Anne, pray for us.
St. Anne's itself, though, is reverse shells. The "Pray for Us" has been painted.
Oh, okay. Anybody know anything about the rubble, the outside structure? Yes?
I'd like to know more about the lake if anyone else can help. I've never heard about a lake being there.
I don't know. Anybody know more about the lake?
How was it fed? What happened to it?
I don't know. I've often wondered if it was spring fed or if it just. There was a spring?
And we couldn't maintain it, I think. And then in time, it was just filled in.
Oh, okay. I heard that the mosquitoes were the reason we filled it in, but I don't know if that's true.
We used to go out there when we were in college, and Mr. Brandon, I think was his name, our professor, and he would explain all the contents of that lake.
Oh,
And it was just quite interesting. I remember quite well. That it was just, at that time, just like in front of the big church, it was ravine. Yeah, and that's been filled in too.
Yeah.
Just because we couldn't maintain all those things.
well, and there's.
The bridge would be all to replace.
I beg your pardon?
The bridge was expected to replace over the ravine.
Yeah.
But what years were you in the college system?
Well, it would have been in the late 50s.
Yeah, there was water
She
there.
graduated in 61.
Upper
I
Si-
think it's curious though, because, and I think from the college perspective now, with LaFair Lake, formerly known as St. Clements, which hardly anybody remembers, is now being used for biology and zoology classes in the same way that St. Anne's was. Nothing gets changed at the woods. We just move around a little.
Yeah. Well, St. Mary's is on an aquifer, I understand. We have our own aquifer, so we have a lot of water, probably more water than we want sometimes. When we're constructing things, we hit water pretty soon. Anybody else have any questions? Or
I did.
yes?
If the technique for the arc glass windows wasn't developed until the 1880s, chapel was built in 1876. Does your research show when those windows were installed?
The glass windows are, the stained glass ones are probably about in the 1920s.
Okay.
And Mr. Bolin, I don't know if you've heard Mr.
yes,
Bolin,
they
he was
are.
consulted about it, so he was around by then.
Okay, great.
And actually, this technique, I think, was older than Tiffany, but I think Tiffany popularized it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Sister, because you are in archives, there's one question that no one has been able to answer to my satisfaction, maybe not even yours. Mother Theodore was a great journalist.
Yes.
She came on the Cincinnati, she came back on the Nashville. How did she get to France?
How did you get the what?
To
To
France.
France. What ship?
When she went in 1843, what ship was she on?
Oh, I don't know. Does
Nobody
anybody know?
Seems to know.
Marie Grace will look it up. Marie Grace will look that up for us. I don't know. She was trying to get Mother Mary and Bishop Bouvier to come and visit her in Indiana because travel was so much easier towards the end of her life. It was much easier to get across the ocean and to get across the country in trains and steamships, but they never came to see her. But the travel changed a whole lot in the course of the years when she was here, like in the 40s, I guess. Yes.
Just going back to the rock, the only place around that area where they used to be able to find that sort of sandstone is if you go to Joni's, the old chicken farm, and come backwards across Thralls. There's a mine used to be back in there, but
Oh.
my family used to get rock out of it, and you can still see where it's exposed. And so we have one well that has the same sort of matching rock as what they cased it in. But I guess that was really rare in that area to have that one layer of bedstone that had been washed out enough where they could get that particular type of rock. It's not usual around here.
Maybe that's where they got it from.
Yeah, because that's real close.
We have records of some of the workmen who built some structures, but we have nothing about that chapel, we had a lot of carpenters and really talented people working for us, but we don't know who, as far as I know, we don't know who constructed that chapel. But it is amazing. I mean, I've never paid attention to it before. Now I'm really interested in it.
Maybe it's like the staircase of Loretto Chapel in Santa Fe.
Yeah, right. St. Joseph came and did it,
Yes. Yes.
or St. Anne came and did it. Yes.
Yeah, I so appreciate your presentation, thank you. But I also wanted to say that there's some people in the audience, I think, that have been collecting mussel shells for, recently, to maybe fill in some places where, to restore as part of the St. Anne Chapel.
But see, we're not allowed to do that right now while we wait for the grant. We can't do anything to it while
Mussel shells. Oh, you're not allowed to collect mussel shells?
No, we're not allowed to do anything to the shrine.
Yeah, no, they've got a
The
lot
shell
of,
beds.
You're not collecting shells either.
well, no, they're covered under permit. We have a permit for
Yeah.
collection and for possession of them.
Okay,
We go
good.
to Indiana DNR, Brant Fisher went with Sister Barbara Batista and I on the first shell collector.
Great, good.
And then Joni has gone with us. Anyway, there's been probably about, what do you think, Joni? 10 sisters have probably helped collect at different times. We kayak and collect.
So you have a trove that once we get the grant,
Yeah.
you'll be able to replace.
We're concerned about the structure itself, the walls. I mean, that's a long time, and I don't know what's between the shells and the outer wall. I don't know how they constructed things in those days, but
I can address a little bit of that. It's batten, which is where, instead of sawn lath, they actually just took sticks and used
Some sort.
yeah, just use like an axe. I mean, they would just sit there and split it,
Yeah.
and then it's actually metal nails that have it up there. But that produces the wood that would be like the lap you put the key into to hold the plaster, and it's horsehair. There's horsehair mixed into there. That's what actually is holding that plaster together. So it's Jemison lye, horsehair, and wood that they probably went out and just got limbs off the ground and hand split them. So it's batten is what it's called, but it's the same as the lap you find in an old plaster house, and so the key is in there, and then that key that you press through with the plaster holds it to the rock
Okay.
wall.
So I don't know how long that lasts, or if water damages that, or, because
It's amazing.
it's been a long time, yeah, right.
No heating or cooling or.
Okay, well, it's, any other questions, or comments?
I do just want to make a statement that the Shell Chapel is open for your viewing daily during daylight hours. So you're welcome to come out and take a look at the chapel.
And they've also scheduled tours of the Shell Chapel during this time. I don't know where those are listed, but Sister Jan Craven's doing tours of the chapel.
You can look on the Riverscape website, and you'll find those there.
Okay.
Lori,
Yes.
will the PowerPoint be available on the Riverscape?
This presentation has been recorded, and so there will be subscribed to the Riverscape YouTube page, and they'll be posted there. All of the speakers series will be posted there, including this one.
Okay.
Sister Janet, thank you so very much
Thank
for
you.
your work and your presentation. Thank you. And of course, we invite you, if you haven't yet, to go to the Vigo County School Corporation Administration Building and view the Smithsonian Waterways exhibit and the companion exhibit, Pearls of the Wabash. They're both really wonderful educational.
Yes, they are. They're
Of
great.
course, the Smithsonian's exhibit is a worldwide approach to the water and its impact on us as humans and on Earth. Pearls of the Wabash really does walk through several very interesting facts about mussels and how mussels have been such an impactful part of our culture here in the Wabash Valley through the years. So we welcome you to do that as well. And thank you for coming here today.
Thank you.